Good evening. My name is David Kesterson, and tonight we'll be talking a little bit about leadership. Um, how many times have you ever had the desire to be in a leadership position? Maybe a manager at a store, maybe the CEO of a company. You know, to be that person who is there to make the decisions, to have people answer to them. I no longer answer to someone, everybody answers to me. Um, that kind of position, who among us has not wanted to lead in some way? I believe that's a very prevalent thought in our society. Um, the society here in the United States, we see that many people desire to be in those leadership positions, to have that power, to tell someone to go do something, or to tell them, okay, you need to go here, you need to be here at this appointed time, you need to do this. Just that power over people, I think is very much so desired in the society we live in. So tonight we're going to be looking, our focus will be on Mark chapter 10, verse 42 through 45. But before we get there, I'd like to go back just to put these verses in context a little bit. I'm going to start talking about the context of this section by starting in about verse 35, which is where James and John are having a conversation with Jesus. They've kind of caught him by himself, and they are asking him, we want to rule with you, one of us on your right and one on your left. And Jesus tells them, I don't know that you know exactly what you're asking for. The role of leadership may not be what you're thinking it is. It's not. Like the Gentiles, it's different. Jesus goes into this discourse with them. And so I'm going to read verses 42 through 45 real quick. In verse 42, it says, "And Jesus called them to him and said to them, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." So wow, in that, we read through that and quickly see that Jesus' idea of leadership is very different than the leadership we have just spoken of. And the leadership we've spoken of is what James and John were talking about, this leadership of power. So first we're going to start with what is Jesus talking about here, how the Gentiles rule over their people. They lord it over them. Well, this is exactly what many of us, I believe, have in our mind of leadership. We get to be the one in charge. We get to be the one making the decision. We get to be the ones telling somebody, go, come. It's honestly as though those that we are leaders over become our servants. And Jesus says, this is not the way my disciples do it. Wow. What a giant contrast right off the bat we see here. A giant difference between Gentile leadership and Christian leadership, and I'm gonna say worldly leadership falls under the Gentile leadership role. So the difference between worldly leadership and Christian leadership we see in this section, how giant it is. Verses 42 and 43, Jesus says, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. Wow, that sounds just like what we were talking about in the beginning when I asked how many out there would like to be leaders. And I believe many people, myself included, at different times of my life, have desired this. But it is not what Jesus has in mind for his disciples. The second point is Christians want to be, if a Christian wants to be a leader, they must be a servant. And this is very different than the Gentile. The Gentile we just talked about is lording it over them. They are power in control. They are the authority. But for the Christian, it is very different. The Christian is to serve. We see verses 43 and 44. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant. Wow. So Jesus has flipped the leadership role. Those who are leaders are the servants. The ones who are leading by serving, not leading wanting servants, but leading by serving. This is the Christian. This is how the Christian is a leader, by serving others. And so, our third point is Christian leaders are to follow Jesus' example as a servant. In verse 45, Jesus says, "For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Wow, Jesus served to the point of death, that he might be that ransom that we needed. He died on a cross to pay for the sins of his followers. He served us in such a way we can't even imagine. While hanging on that cross, Jesus actually paid. He satisfied the wrath of God that his followers deserved. And so him being the ultimate leader gives us this example to follow. He says, even the Son of Man did this. He himself did this. So how much more should we serve following his example? As leaders, this is what we are to do. So how can we do this in our everyday lives? What does this mean? This theme that we're talking about of the difference between worldly leaders and Christian leaders, or just the Christian. Every Christian is truly a leader. We're there to share the gospel with others, lead them to know Jesus Christ. So every Christian actually falls under this heading in leadership. So this is how we do it, is by serving. So Jesus, so how is it that we can practically do these things? This can be done in many different ways, but just some real practical ones for the adults we're talking to tonight. Maybe to go mow someone's lawn who you know has been sick or is hurting, and don't say anything to them up front. Just go cut their lawn, and maybe afterwards, if they come out to thank you or spend a minute talking to you, you might use this opportunity. Not only have you served them, but this might open up an opportunity for you to lead them in a direction that they might know Christ. Also, this could be done for a couple who works a lot and they have some children and they don't get much time to themselves, not many date nights. So maybe you and your wife might volunteer to babysit children. This is a good way. You might know an older person in your neighborhood who is probably having trouble cleaning their house. Maybe volunteer to just come and clean their house, spend some time with them. Another one is something we may not think as actually serving, but could be an incredible service to an elderly person, is just spending time with them talking. Just spend some time seeing how they're doing, talking to them. Maybe even lead a small Bible study with them. but serving them in some way like that. Service doesn't always have to be rebuilding a house or buying things. Many times it can be done in very practical ways, but we have to change our mindset from the mindset that as a Christian leader, we are to only be served. This is so far from what Jesus said. We are to serve others. And so I believe this call goes out to every Christian that they are to be serving those around them. So I hope you've learned a lot from this lesson tonight, and I pray that you can apply it to your life. Take time, and let me end by asking, how will you serve those around you tomorrow? Thank you.